So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time you're watching us. We are more than privileged that you can still be a part of At His Feet podcast, Steadfast Pursuit, and be part of us in our very first episode of the new year 2025. Happy New Year. I am your co-host. My name is Frederick Mainamwangi, an ex-royal and a newbie here in the youth ministry. And I thank the Lord for this privilege to be here to serve Him. With me, I have my boss, I am pretty much an intern here, and this is my boss. I'm having the privilege of interviewing one of my bosses, and so he will be introducing himself.
Ewa, boss. Niite mgongo because I'm back. My name is Denver. I am happy to be here, to be hosted. You said you are an intern, but you're going to call the shots today. So I am excited about the new year, about the discussion today, and just even an opportunity to be able to speak my heart and my mind to whatever it is that we'll be talking about. Yeah, and being a new year, a new recording, I look forward to a great time. So thank you for having me today.
Awesome. And one common quote for us all as believers, especially as we start the new year, not just a believer, but pretty much everybody in our country, in our world, is New Year resolutions. And in today's podcast, we're going to be diving into what are some of the New Year resolutions you should be having as a believer. So if you're still in the process of writing your New Year resolutions, you better grab your pen and paper so that you can be hearing some of the resolutions you're supposed to be having as a believer. And so with that said, we're posing our very first question to Denver. How do you think our aspirations and our resolutions, our New Year goals, should align with God's purpose in our lives?
Well, that's a loaded question. Although in terms of alignment, for me, I don't look at it in the sense of trying to align your resolutions to God's. From the standpoint in which you're talking about, for me, it's about, first of all, aligning to God's purpose. Yeah. And then now, after all that has happened, then now, in terms of the resolutions that you're making in life or for the year, resolutions are not just about the new year. In as much as all of us think about resolutions, every year you set them, but you really ought to have a resolution for yourself in life. So for whatever time frame that it happens, you ensure that it has come to pass. Of course, by God's guidance, not by hook or crook.
True.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's all about, first of all, aligning yourself to God's purpose, first of all. And then now, whenever you're making any resolutions, then you are at a place where now you can say, whatever I am planning for or thinking about, how does it now bring glory to God? You see? So God is beyond time. And in as much as you say that for this year, I want to achieve A, B, C, D, in as much as God would always, in most occasions, He grants us the desires of our hearts. So even if you say that you will do it this year, if it doesn't happen this year, it doesn't mean that God has forsaken you. Yeah. So for me, I'll look at it from that standpoint. First of all, align your life to God. And then now all these resolutions that you're making, they'll definitely find their way to God's plan.
There's honestly so much depth in that answer you've given. And I just love how you bring about the aspect of God's will and God's purpose. We read from Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21, that many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's will that will prevail. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, now that I'm a believer, and maybe you do not understand what your purpose in life is, how would you guide a believer who still has not understood what their purpose in life is?
A believer who doesn't understand his purpose in life yet. Ask and
it shall be given unto
shall
you.
be given. Yeah, so most of the time you'd find people getting discouraged. You could ask someone, what is your purpose in life? And sometimes you get these motivational speakers who speak out there and say that, and especially they advise people who are relating.
Yeah.
It could be even like me and you, and they're saying, be with friends who have a purpose. So you come and ask me, what is your purpose in life? And I honestly don't know how to answer that question.
Could you answer happy?
Yeah. Because I'd be thinking about, what do you want from a response that I'll give you? So I try as much as possible to think about where you're coming from, and then I'd give you an answer that maybe speaks to what you're looking for. But at the end of the day, the whole purpose of man is to worship God.
Yeah.
Then for you, who is a new believer, you ought to commit yourself to prayer. So you pray without ceasing, even if it's not responded to tonight. If you're watching this at night, or whatever time of day that you're watching this, even if God does not answer immediately, he always answers. So you ask God so that you may understand your purpose in life. He may not necessarily come to you in you see, like in the movies where you hear like some background heavy voice speaking to you.
Super.
Passion
of Christ, all these movies we've grown up with.
Calling out your name and then telling you like I don't know if you have watched the movie. Is it the movie? Like the story about Moses. And when he's called to the burning bush, when you hear that voice.
Such a dramatic.
It might not have such effects, but things sometimes unfold like before you, and you get to realize that this is God speaking to me. It could be in various forms. There are those who are spoken to in dreams. There are those who are spoken to through others. But ultimately, if you seek God, and he actually says in Jeremiah that if you seek me, you'll find me, if you do so with the whole of your heart. And just delving yourself into his word, you'd get to understand God more and more, and it opens up your mind to also get ways in which you can find out about your purpose in life. And there's no one way to find out. I think everyone has their own journey.
A lifelong journey.
A lifelong journey. So from which point you will get to realize it, that's you. And you might not necessarily copy paste another person's way of finding their purpose in life.
Yes.
Hey,
thank you for that, Denver. So much wisdom in everything that you've said, and I love how in one of your sentences you've mentioned ultimately our purpose in life is to worship God, which brings us back to New Year resolutions, and how majority of the time, even probably you who are watching, we make New Year resolutions that are mainly about ourselves. So I'm pretty sure if you have a pen and paper right now and you are writing your resolutions, of course, if you're a young person, you want to get rich, you want to have a wife or a husband, you want to have this number of kids by this certain age, you want to work at that certain company, you want to, but my point is, majority of those resolutions are about you. It's more of how am I benefiting, where am I going? So now, as a Christian, how can we form resolutions that go beyond our personal value, our personal gain, our personal goals? And what are some of those resolutions?
I think, now this is just on me. I think whenever in Christianity, if you're talking about anything that is personal, it's about your salvation. Because salvation is individual. So I may not necessarily rely on your salvation for me to go to heaven. So if my aim is to go to heaven, now that is a personal choice.
Yeah.
But then how do you live out your Christianity? It's not in silos or in isolation. It's how you relate with others.
True.
It's how you spur one another on towards love and good deeds. It's how you, when Jesus says that whenever you showed up for the least of these people, you are actually doing it for me.
Yes.
Yeah. So how are you measured now against all these things? When you're baptized, I think I witnessed your baptism.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're baptized, it's an individual choice. You resolved in your heart that you needed to be baptized.
True.
It didn't contribute to anyone else's salvation in any way, but it was about you. But also now, in terms of you becoming a good steward of the resources that God has bestowed upon you, and also this salvation, if you look at it in terms of it being a resource as well, how do you also now even go out there and reaching out to many people and bringing them to the knowledge of Christ, for Christ to save them?
True.
Yeah. So for me, I think ultimately, you even if you look out widely in terms of the things that you can do for the community, in good faith, not for self gratification or to show your medals out there. Ultimately, you will be rewarded individually. You see, so even if you look at it from the standpoint of you want to be generous, even if many of the people that you impact will be rewarded, you will also be rewarded amongst them. But if you look at it from a selfish standpoint, it becomes hard. Which brings me to the story of Jonah. Remember when Jonah was sent to go and speak to the people of Nineveh, and he felt that those people weren't deserving of God's mercy. And in his mind, he thought that God is just playing with them, and he will actually punish them. So, so he went there and he preached. And God's word was sent, the warning was given out, and people actually repented. And then he went and sat at a high ground waiting for the apocalypse. Yeah? So, and then God now brought, it was at a place where it was hot. Yeah? Overnight, a tree grew to offer shade to Jonah. But then very next day, it was destroyed. And then he felt bad, to which God now was asking him if he understood where that tree even came from. Because for him, he was just complaining. He just thought about himself and wanted other people to be destroyed. But if you look at a way in which you would be able to serve others, ultimately, even if they benefit from what you have done, even you, it doesn't take anything away from you. Yeah, you will still get to benefit out of it. So if you're setting a resolution for yourself, set that resolution to you look widely. Don't look at it just on a personal level. Even if you want to grow spiritually through God's word,
look at how is it benefiting the other one.
Not necessarily even benefiting the other one. If you're not understanding the word when you're reading alone, if I approach you, would I understand it better? And possibly, if I do that, I am probably even helping you in your devotion. Without even knowing, you see. So you might not be deliberately going out there and saying that this year I purpose to mentor someone. But through your actions and all the things that you're doing, someone is looking at you, admiring what you're doing, and is even looking at you as an example of how to live out their lives.
Yeah. I love that example. And I think just to add on everything you've said, one practical way we can do this is through volunteering. Like personally at campus, when people usually hearing that you're maybe volunteering for some, maybe give an example of career week, the first question people will ask is, unalipwa pesa ngapi? If they hear you're like a career week ambassador, if they hear you involved in like culture week, the first question is, unalipwa pesa ngapi? When majority of these things are actually voluntarily. And so there is benefit in volunteering in that, just as you've said, it's not just about you gaining, but even when you're doing those, you're earning invaluable skills. Forget about the valuable asset. You're earning an invaluable skill. And the way you've said, there's a person who will look at you, admire the way you're living your Christian life, and eventually be inspired to start following Christ without you even knowing. And that is something that God will forever bless.
True. And I think even for those people who are watching, it's good to, some of these things help you to build your social capital. Sometimes we are on this mindset that you need to secure the bag. But there are
Chasing
things,
the bag.
there are things that money may not necessarily achieve. If you build a good social network, it comes through in very many ways. You might make a huge amount of money, but that money is not emotional. It may not necessarily hug you in times when you need to feel that warmth. You see, but your social capital actually helps you do that. And sometimes, even for someone who is out there and feeling like they don't have money, they would be saying that, I am probably just saying or becoming philosophical. But you get to realize some of the people who you would say that they have acquired wealth, some of them even saying how they, like, money has helped them to solve a lot of things, but it has also not helped them solve many other things. So in the place that you're confined with your troubles, you feel like if you threw money there, your troubles would go away, but they never actually go away.
True. I love how that is philosophical. Unaturudisha back to the book of Ecclesiastes. Life is meaningless, life is useless. Just when you think you've made it, you come to realize, there was more to life. It was not the end. And I love how these things are easier said than done, by the way. It was a quote I was reading the other day, and it was saying, don't measure your spiritual life by how much you know the word of God, but measure your spiritual life by how much you live the word of God. And when you look at that quote, there's so much depth into it, especially for a person who just became saved. Maybe you're watching this and you were saved in this Sunday service. There's a lot of like fire in you when you become saved. You're like, now I'm saved, I'll be reading the Bible, I'll be going to church, I'll be fellowshipping with other believers. But over time, I don't know what happens. You grow weary, Satan's temptations become bigger, and at times you feel derailed. Now, that can also affect you in your New Year resolutions. You make very good New Year resolutions. Venye tu tumesema, they're even beyond your own personal goal. You're even looking at how it is they can inspire someone, although that's not the goal. Your goal is to worship God. But over time, mwaka ikiendelea, when time goes on, you really get to a point where you are discouraged, derailed, you're having a burnout, you're feeling overwhelmed. So how would you deal with that? And what advice would you give to a person dealing with that?
I think you start at the point of setting now your resolutions. Were the resolutions that you made realistic? They could be, but were they realistic to you? in terms of also the number. You might make there could be someone out there who has made like 20 resolutions for 2025. They're going to diet, they'll go to the gym, they'll read the word of God, they will go to fellowships, they will, I don't know, a lot of things. What would derail such a person? Maybe something new comes up in the course of the year. For example, you make a resolution that this year you will further your studies. Let's say even for someone who is working, say that this year I plan to start my master's degree. And then as you're looking towards starting your master's degree, you get a better job.
Sasa tuko kwa crossroads.
Yeah, you get a better job, bigger bag, not enough time to set aside to study. You see?
Yeah.
So what do? Do you tell yourself that you put your studying resolution on hold until you find your footing in the new line of work? Or do you decline this work for you to study? Sometimes it can be very risky. I'm not saying that I have a response to that example. It can put yourself now at a crossroad where you're thinking about now realigning your
purpose.
Yes. And say that maybe we can let this year slide and look at next year for this particular resolution. Something new comes up and it's the in thing, and you feel like this one kidogo tricky. So for example, you tell yourself that this year I plan to study the word of God from Genesis to Revelations. And then you get to realize, by the way, kuna Bible study inakuanga youth every Friday. Yeah. And then you're like, why do I toil reading Genesis to Revelation when I can attend BS every Friday?
True.
But then you see now that would derail your resolution. Yeah. You found that now this one is a bit easier for me to deal with.
It's realistic to you.
It's realistic now. In as much as it's good, whatever you had set as a plan for you, you have derailed it. You see, it may not necessarily mean that something bad has happened. Something that you feel that is better appears, and you have to maybe to halt whatever you had planned. But it's about also balance. You see, do not overwhelm yourself with a lot of things and forget that there's life that ought to be lived, and there's this work of salvation that God is doing in your life that you also ought to experience.
True.
Yeah. So I'd say during the year, a lot of things would come to derail you. Now it's a matter of how focused you are with your resolutions. Not saying I'm perfect at
No one
at
is.
that.
No one is.
Yeah. So it's and there are people out there who say they don't set resolutions. Utapata tu mtu amesema tu for me I'm not that person for resolutions, but deep down they do. It's a matter of what is their definition of a resolution. Utapata mtu ameplan this year atafanya kitu fulani, and because they didn't write it down, they say andikangi resolutions, but probably they have written it in their hearts,
Their minds. True.
and in their minds. Yeah.
Love that. I love that aspect of being realistic. It's something each one of us can learn. Kwanza we mentioned those parts that hit home, like going to the gym. At times we really, I don't know, tunakuwa na resolutions in gani, but like unapata you've downloaded those apps, work from homes. six pack in 30 days. No, unaenda kwa ile extreme. You know, maybe like unaweza anza na losing fat, then now building muscles, but you want to like overburden yourself, overwhelm yourself, and eventually that derails your resolution. So also don't be too harsh on yourself, you know. Unakula mosmos, you know, one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 minute at a time.
Mosmos ni ya kitambo. Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's nice venye umekaa ukimention that through the year you will find things that will try to derail your resolutions.
Yeah.
So now, what are some of the temptations that you think young Christians are often facing which derail their resolutions?
Temptations.
We want the points as they hit home to you. You know, if you're watching, you're like, yeah, you're mentioning me.
I think resolutions aren't necessarily like easy. The reason why you set them is because you want to achieve them. And if they were easy, I think everyone would be done with them tomorrow.
Yeah.
You see.
And we would be in heaven by next week.
Yeah. So the fact that they are not easy, it means that along the way, temptations will always come. So for that person who has, let's say, decided that this year they will be dieting, you see, but then ni resolution zenye amejiekea ye mwenyewe, and then aende apatane na beste yake mwenye yeye, mkishapatana hivi, tuseme kama mimi nimepatana na Kizangla, yeah, tumefika tumefika kona fulani, inakuanga na mtu rapoa sana, basi sasa mimi sitaki kumwambia nimemeki resolution, but then hata pia mimi in my mind ninajiambia pia ati kwani siku moja ita affect kila kitu.
Yeah.
There's a song,
a one-time thing.
There's a song ya Casting Crowns. I don't know if you know them. Inasemanga, inaitwa Slow Fade. Cities never crumble in a day. It's always a slow fade. Gradual. Yeah, gradual. Even for relationships, they don't just end. It's a pile up of things until you get to a point where it's beyond you. You see? So you might lie to yourself that mtura siku moja haita affect. But then now the experience, you know, experiences live in our hearts and in our minds. Yeah. So every time I pass by that place, ya 20. But unajua hata nikisema ya 20, sitakula ya 20.
True.
Itakuwa more and more. Sometimes if it's about gymming, you might, the first few weeks you might be going, and then at a certain point, maybe you just miss to go, maybe because you are held up by something or a situation. And how relaxing it felt, you want to experience it tomorrow. You see? And then you get to a point where you're like, what? It's 3 months.
As is mostly the case for all of us who are watching.
And then you're trying to recover. Yeah? And then you push yourself so hard, and then you're like, nah, apana, nitaanza fresh. Yeah? So I think
nitaanza 2026. Sasa tutaanza fresh hapo.
Ama unajiambia tu akitambia ijatokea, so bado niko safe. But at the end of the day, the reason why it's hard, it only means that temptations also exist. In as much as there would be barriers, but temptations also exist. Yeah. And even if you decide that for whatever reason that you have decided, you are mentioning about even marriage, you say that this year you will get married, but then something else comes along the way, even if it's job. Sorry, I'm mentioning about job a lot. But it's about now even realigning your resolutions to, you remember when we were beginning, when you're talking about aligning resolutions to God's will. Don't put your resolutions on this side and every other thing here. Put those resolutions in place and see how your daily routine contributes to your resolutions. So even if it's getting married, utakuja useme ati sikuoa kwa sababu job imekuwa intense this year. But you look at yourself in terms of how does this job now contribute to me ultimately getting married. If I intend to intentionally be committed to my relationship, nisiende tena nimwambie najua tulikuwa tukwe na dates kadhaa this year lakini fellowship ilishika. Unaona? So now how does that fellowship contribute to also you building a healthy relationship even with your friends? So it's wide. I think for me, it's wider than just looking at it in terms of temptations.
I love that aspect, and I totally agree with everything. And also add the point of, I think there's a part we mentioned, you're with your friend, then your friend and mutura, then it was your resolution, but you choose to compromise it. I think also as young people, we really struggle with peer validation. And I feel like some of our resolutions, we just make them out of peer validation to validate our peers. We want to prove a point. So you're like, I'll get a job so that I post it for you to see that I got a job. Or you're like, I'll marry this girl to prove a point that I can get that girl, you know? Like we are really seeking peer validation. And I love how you've said everything should align to God's will. It's taking us back to the first question, that now those resolutions should seek God's validation, God's approval, and not what people think.
But also try and look at it from this point. Sometimes it's easier to look at things in the context of how watu wengine. Unaona? Like when we say that maybe seeking other people's validation. Now, even for you as a person, how do you look at other people's resolutions? Unaona? Isikuwe ni like for you unaangalia tu nikipatana with my friend atafikiria aje kuhusu this resolution that I have made. But also now for you, for the people who will make resolutions that you will come to the knowledge of, how are you going to receive them, and also how are you going to help them also probably feel that their resolutions are legit. Unaona? So like sana utapata if someone decided to diet this year, I think pia nimeongelelea diet sana, nafaa kutafuta example ingine. Mtu sasa kama ameamua ni kudiet, is it that you're the kind of friend who will be like, wewe acha zako, easy ni, I don't know,
discouraging them.
You would be discouraging them. And then ultimately when they fail, you're like, sinilikushow. And then you're telling them to be realistic with their resolutions. But probably they wanted to find validation from you, that whatever it is that they are doing is something noble. There's a reason as to why someone is setting a resolution. If you decide to go to the gym, then there's a reason why you're going there, unless you want to kill it on social media that you do it, which is also a reason. You never know what it helps someone to do. It could be something mental, you see. So even for you, look at yourself in how you will be looking at other people's resolutions if they decide to tell you about them.
Awesome. Also deep stuff, which throws us back to a question that relates to what we had discussed on earlier. How majority of the times the resolutions we write, the resolutions we form are things to do with worldly achievements.
Yeah.
So if you look like getting a job, getting a master's degree, getting married. Okay, in reality, all these things are worldly achievements. Like if you go back to what you had earlier on, says our ultimate purpose is to worship God. So then again, as a believer, how can you prioritize your spiritual growth over worldly achievements, and you make that a resolution?
Wow. I buy into the saying that life is spiritual first before it's physical. And if you read Colossians 3:23, that whatever you're doing, do so heartily as unto the Lord.
And not for man.
Yeah, and not for man. So even if you're seeking for that job, whatever it is that you're doing, when you compartmentalize things and say that this is what were we saying, physical or what?
Materialistic.
Yeah, if we decide to segment them and say that this is materialistic and this one is spiritual, we might miss the mark. You see. And if you talk about spiritual, maybe someone is thinking about going to fellowship, praying, reading the word. Yeah. And maybe, let's say in there, I'm Ekati. Probably I plan to get baptized this year. And then you put them aside and you say, now these are your spiritual resolutions. For the material ones, ni hivi na hivi na hivi. So how about in your place of work, how you're working? Are you doing so diligently? And if your lifestyle is worship, is it seen in your work, in your place of study? Do people see you, your fellow students, look at you and see that you embody that life of a Christian? You see? So for me, all of these things
can be spiritual.
Yeah. Ni vile tu now, if you decide to look at it from that standpoint, now this is materialistic, this is spiritual, that's where you'd find yourself trying to look at, now how do they balance? Is the material stuff heavier than spiritual? But all in all of these things were spiritual from the beginning. Yeah. So probably whenever you were, let's say, sinning, that's when now you put it now on the other side of the scale. Yeah. Maybe as you're trying to grow spiritually, what was wearing you down? You see, at the end of the day. So I tried to work diligently at work, but then I was told to sign off a certain check that you felt it was dubious. You see, that derails your
resolutions, everything.
Yeah, it derails everything. So for me, I think everything is spiritual, and then now you start from there.
I love that mentality. So if you're writing your New Year resolutions right now, do make sure that, as he has said, the audience is God. All of them are spiritual. So like if you're going to do well in your work, you're doing it for God. I love how you've brought up Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it as though you're working for God and not for man. In anything and everything we are doing. So because majority of these things are usually easier said than done, what are some resources that you think can guide young believers stay on track?
You remember when I was talking about building your social capital? Your social capital helps you to also, it keeps you in check. Yeah. The circle that you have, in most cases, they know what you do, where to get you. They know your mindset.
Yeah.
So if they brought an idea to you, most likely they know you'd buy into the idea.
True.
Unless, if you don't, probably it's an outlier, you see. But in most cases, they know your mindset, whatever you're doing. So if you surround yourself with people who keep you accountable, it's also a resource for you. Secondly, I think also in our day and age, there are very many avenues, even with this podcast. Yeah. If you do a YouTube search for podcasts that speak about a certain topic, you'd find them, whether it's in audio form or video. We are at an age where you find ebooks. If finding a physical book is hard. Like from top of mind, those are some of the things I would say are some of the resources that would help you, and especially if you're a believer, and even if you're not a believer, the prayer is that at a certain point you'd come to the knowledge of God and receive Christ in your life. And if you're watching this, you have like a head start of where to go if you wanted some of these resources. So it could be people, it could be even the materials, even the environment around you. Now, sometimes you'd want an environment that is calming for you to be able to perform optimally in your line of work. So if you wanted to read the word every night, do you go to an apartment where Juni club na nini yako haiko soundproof? You see, so even the environment itself is a resource that God has given you. From top of mind, I think that's what I could say.
And I love how you've brought about the social media era. Okay, let me say the digital era. And you've talked about like something like this, a podcast. Because majority of the time I usually feel as if when we're talking about the internet, we only mention the negatives. We only talk about cyberbullying and access to pornographic material. We mention a lot of negatives, but in such things you can find, Christian podcasts that can be a resource for you to increase your resolutions.
But you also know on the internet also, whatever you there's such a thing as an algorithm. And people who are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter, you'd find that a lot of things, even for the people that you do not follow, there are posts that you receive, but it's based on your interest, you see. So if, for example, on Twitter, I receive a lot of basketball news. And I think even in June 25th, 2024, we had like the mother of all demonstrations. I think at that point in time, we were all discussing about
current affairs.
Current affairs. So you'd get that the algorithm has been set in such a way that you receive a lot of such posts. And even for like the top influencers that push for those things. So ultimately, whatever you feed yourself, you will always be seeing them. Someone says that if your dream is to have like a red car, if you walked on the road, you'd see a lot of red cars. But if that thing is not in your mind, you probably won't even notice red cars around. So even for the internet, there are positive things, but it depends on how you yourself are controlling it. So look at what you feed off from the internet. Of course, there are those negative things that happen. In most cases, sometimes, you can even be, for whatever good you mean, you might come out as an arrogant person. So for example, zinaweza kuwa ni shida za kujitakia. So someone posts something very nasty. And then because comment section ni yetu, unaenda hapo kumpatia neno. Yeah. But people are reactive, you see.
Yeah.
So if they're like-minded and they find you there and start attacking you, some people are even called Deputy Jesus. Yeah. If they start attacking you, so from your standpoint, you meant well. You're trying to correct something, but your approach is probably not the best. So be very wise in how you
Discernment.
Yeah. Sometimes you may not necessarily want to go there and attack someone. What if you talked about these things by your own posts? Let's say you purpose to post a verse and a lesson that you learned from that verse. So whoever picks it, they go
well and good.
Yeah, well and good. But if you decide to go on someone's comment section, kidogo pia inakuwa tricky kidogo. Yeah.
I love how philosophical that is, and you've talked, it's like will, it's what you choose.
Yeah.
You know, you've also like, so if you're watching this podcast, do watch more podcasts so that your algorithm is Christian podcasts.
Yeah.
Because I love how you brought the aspect of you are exactly who you think you are, and you will gradually become whatever it is you're watching, whatever it is you're subscribing to. So now for the final question, ladies and gentlemen, how would you keep the fire burning? Because I feel like these New Year resolutions are something we do as if it's a New Year tradition. And then majority of them are never fulfilled. And then you like when you feel discouraged, you're just like, 2025 was not my year. You know, this is 2026. You know, this is 2020, this is 2030. Vision 2030 is still on board. So how would you keep the fire burning? How would you make these resolutions an important, active part of your life and not just a New Year's tradition?
Wow. I'd say if you're setting resolutions for the year, I think one other resolution you need to add to it is monitoring and evaluation. You can evaluate your resolutions. So on top of your resolutions, add an evaluation. It could be probably even quarterly. Set targets for your resolution. So if you say that, you know, there are those resolutions that are defined. So you were mentioning about getting married. It has a date. You don't go hoping that, hey, this year I need to get married. So imefika 25th of December and you're telling yourself, nimebakisha 6 days na bado. Yeah. So you set a target, and maybe probably even quarterly, you evaluate your achievements. And most of the time, and even for those who are watching, the hope is that even when you're setting your resolutions, you're committing them to the Lord in prayer. So whenever God is answering these prayers, do you know that it also builds your faith?
True.
You continuously know that actually God answers prayers.
Yes.
And it makes you even more zealous about the things that you do. And even for the following year, you'd be like, last year I set these goals and I achieved all of them. So today, or this year, I'm going to set others, and I believe that the Lord who answered my prayers will also do the same. And I think that would keep the fire burning
all through.
Yeah, all through.
I love your message on, you know, that moment of reflecting so that you can see God answers prayers. I think research in psychology shows that as human beings, we tend to only remember the most intense moments. So that it was intensely bad or intensely good, that's the thing you're most likely to remember. But I feel like tendencies usually go towards intensely bad. So you just remember how discouraged you are, how depressed you are. But now that you've mentioned that, it's good to also reflect how good the Lord was, you know. So come on, don't struggle with depression. Reflect on, be thankful, have gratitude. Think of the prayer you had that the Lord answered. And I think that is something that will help you keep the fire burning.
Yeah. And even so, sometimes, you know, these things don't happen instantly.
Yeah.
So it could be one thing building onto another until you ultimately get to achieve whatever it is that you had set out. So even if you look back and you feel like you have not achieved, but you can clearly see that there was progress, it's also something. Yeah.
Count your blessings.
Yeah. So some things may not just happen instantly and you're waiting to evaluate, but you can tell that it is coming.
Truly.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an insightful podcast with Denver talking about New Year resolutions. Denver, what would be your take home?
Hey, take home. For me, it would be committing resolutions to God in prayer, evaluating the progress, and even if not just for this 2025, first of all, look back and see where you have come from, and look out for things that you feel like you need to thank God for.
Gratitude.
Yeah. And some of the things that I was reflecting on as I was responding, they were coming as you ask the question, it comes to mind, and I'm like, for whatever, interesting. For whatever it is that I need to take home, is that for these resolutions, I shouldn't tell myself that I am not a person for resolutions, because deep down there are things I am looking forward to.
True.
Yeah. So if I choose not to call them resolutions, it doesn't change the fact that they are resolutions at the end of the day. Yeah.
I think my personal resolution, my take home, would be that statement you said, as human beings, our ultimate purpose is to worship God. And all your resolutions are pretty much glorifying God. They're all spiritual. So this has been a wonderful podcast, and we do hope that this podcast will guide you, will act as an agent to the Lord. As Denver said, God can talk through people, dreams, visions, all these things. So we do pray that this will be a guiding factor for you as you continue to write your New Year resolutions. Nonetheless, thank you for still being a part of the At His Feet podcast Steadfast Pursuit segment. We are thankful to the Lord for how far we have come, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Stay tuned. Be blessed.
Peace.